This PowerPoint addresses the environmental and cultural factors of the vulnerable population, refugees, presented by me, Stacy Stevens. The way the media portrays refugees depends on the channel you are watching, CNN or Fox News. Most TV and movies involving refugees are documentaries. A recent mainstream film from 2004 is Hotel Rwanda. It portrays the horrors of civil war in the African country of Rwanda in 1994. Whichever interpretation you choose, be sure to have a box of tissues handy. Family support is integral to a refugee. Endangerment of the family is a main reason for fleeing. Refugee families flee their native home together and fight to stay together. Resettled refugee families generally live as multiple generations in one household. They are usually described as each other's support. Peers are another considerable support to refugees. Refugee aid societies encourage resettled refugees to engage in support groups, whether in person or something like a Facebook group. Refugees can stay in touch with peers who are not geographically near via social media. Keeping contact with their native culture helps with stress of resettlement. Use of mobile devices also keep their peers close. States with large numbers of refugees or immigrants are instigating youth mentor programs where Native children will help these students assimilate to American life, a new environment, and to have a friend. Some of the cultural environmental factors do have a cyclical nature. For example, depression and mental illness among refugee youth is higher than non-refugee youth. Thus, from a young age, these youth are faced to deal with the difficulties that come with depression and mental illness. Since mental illness is a lifelong struggle, it can affect future generations and others who are close to them. In the psychotherapy world, new studies and therapies are emerging and being developed that focus specifically on the refugee experience. Resettled refugees generally live a lifestyle of poverty. As with any other populations, the cycle of poverty can be difficult to break. But there are many success stories of people of refugee heritage that go on to be successful adults and do amazing things. How does the legal and political system help or hinder refugees? The refugee issue in America is highly politicized. Basically, Democrats want to open borders to more refugees, and Republicans do not. In the fiscal year of 2018, there were 22,491 refugees allowed into the United States. That year, there was supposed to be a cap, or the U.S. was supposed to allow 45,000 people. This disparity was due to the travel ban set by President Trump for mostly Muslim countries. In 2019, there were 30,000 resettled in the U.S., which was the same as the proposed cap. In 2020, the cap is set for 18,000. These last 3 years are the lowest ceilings since Congress passed the Refugee Act of 1980. Refugees face many potential barriers. There is definitely a language barrier. Younger generations learn a new language more easily than older. They are also more immersed at school as opposed to parents or grandparents isolated at home. Older generations also may choose not to learn new languages, but hold on to their home culture. Raising Americanized children is a barrier in refugee homes. This throws off the parent-child dynamic and may put the family at odds. Parents are eager for their children to get a good education, but children struggle to keep up in class. Many children report discrimination and bullying at school. Parents may also struggle to assist kids with homework because of lack of language skills or educational level. Finding employment can prove problematic. Frustrations come from not being able to understand language enough to follow directions. Refugees are frustrated that they can't find work similar to their livelihood at home. Many had equitable skills and high levels of education. They they also report discrimination and exploitation in the workplace. Employers will take advantage of their desperation. Adequate housing is also a significant barrier. Low-paying jobs make it difficult to find housing that is affordable and safe. It may be difficult to access services, whether it be healthcare or refugee aid. They are probably not going to have internet access to explore the resources available to them. Getting time off work or lack of transportation can make it difficult to physically reach resources. Public transportation can be frightening to many as they cannot read instructions or address signs and are not familiar with the systems. Many cultures have a stigma with regards to mental health. Even if they have access to it, they may refuse. Racism is also a major barrier that refugees face. Looking at the international scope of the refugee population, I found some astonishing statistics worldwide. There are 70.8 million people who are considered refugees. A refugee is defined by unrefugees.org as someone who has been forced to flee his or her country because of persecution, war, or violence. A refugee has a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. The 5 most common countries that refugees originate from are Syria, Afghanistan, South Sudan, Myanmar, and Somalia. 2.6 million refugees live in camps. These camps are deplorable and dangerous. Refugees can live in camps for generations. Less than 2% will be resettled or placed in different countries for permanent residence. 3 million people have been resettled as refugees in the United States since 1975, have been welcomed by all 50 states. However, the U.S. is not even one of the top 10 countries that accept refugees and offer aid. Some of the socioeconomic factors that can affect a refugee's health disparities are low-income jobs. They may not be able to afford insurance or have it offered by employers. They work more than one job, so it's difficult to take time off to take care of themselves. They experience exploitation from employers and landlords. They are taken advantage of because they are afraid to speak up or don't know differently. Landlords may place undue fees or higher rent. Employers may pay less for the same amount of work. Inadequate housing. Usually they live in a crowded family environment, which increases the risk for communicable diseases. Children don't have a quiet place to do homework, so it makes it hard to excel at school. They are frequently placed in unsafe neighborhoods. Many low-income housings are in unsafe neighborhoods, and that puts them at risk for harm and crime. They generally have no transportation and makes it difficult to get to providers. Race and ethnicity can increase risks for health disparities. Different ethnic diets may pose different health risks, such as diets that are high in fat or red meat. But other diets may decrease health disparities, such as those that are used to a Mediterranean diet or are high in grains as opposed to unhealthy American foods. Genetically, there are some ethnicities that carry higher risks of certain diseases. For example, Asians have a higher rate of hypertension. African Americans have a higher risk of sickle cell anemia. For many cultures, preventative medicine is a foreign concept. They may be used to seeing a provider only for acute illness and expect an immediate remedy. Many refugees become frustrated with lack of translation help at providers or hospitals and become avoidant of seeking out health care. The CDC has set out guidelines for physicians so that they can be aware of different ailments that may be more specific to refugees of different regions. For example, some have higher incidences of parasites or soil-transmitted infections or malaria, depending on their native climates. For many refugees, religion may be one of the reasons that they had to flee their home country. Some religions are not accepting of modern medicine and look more to non-Western remedies. Other religions deem women to be subservient and increase which increases their risk for domestic violence and isolation. However, spirituality and religious practice have been associated with better health outcomes and improved mental health. Gender can have inherent risks with health disparities. Female refugees are highly at risk for gender-based violence, especially in refugee camps. Some cultures perform female genital mutilation, which in turn puts them at higher risk for difficult labor and delivery. Pregnant refugees have probably had a lack of prenatal care. They are also at higher risk for isolation due to traditional cultures of females staying in the home. Male refugees may be at higher risk for depression due to inability to adequately provide for their family, whereas they were able to do so at home. The American culture of some men helping at home and women working can affect family dynamics. Males have a higher risk for alcohol abuse, and they are more likely to have been exposed to torture. With regards to geographical location, telemedicine has proven to be very useful in refugee camps. Of course, electricity and internet connection can be an issue, but it has been used for OBGYN, pediatrics, dental, surgical, infectious disease, psychiatry, neurology, anesthesiology, and of course, general medicine. Geographical location can be a big health determinant for refugees in camps when they are exposed to extreme climates of heat or cold. Refugees can be objects of both explicit and implicit biases. Explicit biases include racism, anti-refugee sentiment, and exploitation from employers or landlords. Implicit biases may come from healthcare givers or refugee aid providers, despite their best intentions. It's hard not to put them into a category and see them as an individual rather than a list of needs or things to fix. To answer the question, are there regions in the world in which these disparities would have less influence on health for refugees? I would have to say no. Refugees originate from all over the world. Wherever they end up, resources are difficult to come by that will give them the assistance that they need. So here's my plug for refugees that I've come to acknowledge through my vulnerable population research. You can educate yourself about refugees. You can speak up for them. If you meet a refugee, give them a hand or a hug. Get to know them. And lastly, give of yourself, whether in time or money, to a refugee cause. Listed below are several resources to assist you. Thanks for watching. Peace.